Okay.
All right.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Seeing Beyond the Veil. Everyone always asks me, how did this class come into being? And actually, the beginnings of this class are rooted all the way back in the mid-1980s. I was teaching what is now levels 1, 2, and 3 of my psychic development class. Now, that group of classes teaches what I call the lower levels of psychic development. It teaches you telepathy, clairvoyance, empathy, clairsentience. It teaches you how to reach out into the world around us with your psychic senses, and it teaches you to make that connection to your higher consciousness so that you have the beginnings of the ability to connect with your higher self and your guides. Now, my students were going through those classes, levels 1, 2, and 3, for a couple of years. Notice I said same students for a couple of years. I have a habit of collecting students that never leave. They go and they take them again. They say, hey, gee, what more could I learn? They go and they take them again. And, actually, you really do gain a lot out of taking those classes over and over again because you yourself are at a different level. And when I teach folks, I channel. So my guides come in and they help me to teach the classes that I teach. So when I'm teaching people who are at a beginner's level, we get a beginner level class. When I'm teaching people who are at a more advanced level, we get a more advanced level class, even though it's dealing with the same material. So you can always expect that the class might have the same foundation, but what we're covering is going to be hit from a slightly different direction if it's a class that you're repeating. Well, I had the same group of people that were going through this class several times. And they said, finally, they said, Sandy, what's next? And I knew exactly what they meant. I mean, after all, I'm a psychic and I'm channeling. And I said, I don't know what you mean. What do you mean, what's next? And they said, well, what do we do next? And what they really wanted me to do was to teach them mediumship. They wanted me to teach them how to connect with people on the other side. Well, you will notice if you look at my psychic development programs that I now do teach channeling and mediumship. Levels 4, 5, and 6 of the Anastasi system of psychic development teach channeling and mediumship. Back then, I didn't teach it. Back then, I was very, very resistant to bothering people on the other side. And that really is the best way to put it. I just didn't really want to bother them. Not that I didn't believe they were there. I knew they were there. I just didn't really want to bother them. So instead I said to my students, well, it sounds to me like you really want to know what's on the other side. And they said, well, we really want to talk to people on the other side, but if you're not going to teach that, well, what can you tell us about the other side? And I said, okay, let's pull that class together. And that's how Seeing Beyond the Veil actually came about. It began as a result of students' requests. So, the first thing that I did, typical of me, is I cracked the books. A lot of you aren't aware, but my entire background is mainstream scientific. I have teaching certification in 5 subjects. I was a safety engineer for 11 years. My whole education coming up through high school and college was scientific pre-med. Didn't go in that direction, but that was the direction I almost went in. So when somebody says, teach a class, I hit the books. So I went and I researched Ledbetter, White Eagle, Jane Roberts, Alice Bailey. The list went on and on. There are enormous numbers of authors who wrote, particularly in the early part of the 20th century, around 1920s, who were the brightest lights of this particular generation, this new age that we are entering now. And many, many of the books that were written back then, Alice Bailey, Dion Fortune, just amazing pieces of work. Gurdjieff. Many of the books that were written back then are still so far beyond us that our brightest people sit down and read them and then have to reread them and then have to reread them again before they can understand them. And it's not that those books are wrong or that they're gibberish. It's that they were written about things that didn't exist yet. So, has anybody here, for example, ever picked up one of Alice Bailey's volumes? Okay, I'm seeing a hand over here. You know, we don't have that extra microphone that I love to walk around with. John, would you grab that microphone and do me a favor of holding it? Isn't that wonderful? I love when two guys hug and one of them has the microphone, pat, 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 and we all get to participate in the hug. Thank you. That's wonderful.
Give each other 3 pats on the back.
Before you bring the microphone, I'm going to tell you I'm having a blank on the name of the book.
You don't need to remember the name,
Okay.
okay? But I would like to hear what you thought about it, okay? My question was, did anybody here ever read anything out of the Alice Bailey material? And if you did, what did you think of it? How did you resonate to it at the time?
I would say that Alice Bailey was an awakening for me, an opportunity to understand that there was something beyond what I just on an everyday basis thought of as being reality. I think she did a beautiful job of describing that world beyond our world.
In many, many ways.
Yes.
Who else read Alice Bailey? Okay, let's pass the mic down to people.
I guess for me, it was also an awakening, but a lot of it was very hard initially to digest because I tend to be the kind of person that likes to dive in the deep end of the pool, and I just didn't have the foundation to be able to grasp it all. Mm-hmm. So I picked up bits and pieces, but I was aware that there was a lot that I was leaving behind.
Absolutely.
So I really want to reread it now because I have more of a foundation.
Thank you. That's really what I wanted to hear. Anybody else? Another one that's on that same level is Jane Roberts. How many people have picked up Seth Speaks, or The Nature of Human Personality, or The Nature of Reality? Okay, can we pass the mic around? I would like to hear your take on these books. Jane Roberts, by the way, did not write in the 1920s. She wrote in the 1970s. Okay, but again, she was one of those very brilliant authors. Alice Bailey, incidentally, channeled a being by the name of Joal Kuhl, who is a member of the White Brotherhood who helps to guide mankind, a brotherhood that exists on the other side, according to Joal Kuhl. Jane Roberts, famed for channeling a being by the name of Seth. And of course, we don't know who Seth represents. We assume Seth was an individual soul who imparted to us enormous and amazing bits of information. So let's hear, what did you think when you, or feel when you were reading the Seth books, the books by Jane Roberts?
I read the Seth book, and it was in 1990. So it was intriguing, but it was so over my head, and the funniest part was I would fall asleep every time I read it. So I'd always have to go back and start a few pages back.
Okay,
and I just remember.
Kim, let me interrupt you just for a moment, because I want you to hear what you just said. Here's a book written in the 70s. She came to it in the 90s. Kim is a very bright woman, very well educated, very fine mind. Believe me, there is nothing wrong with Kim's mind that she had little trouble following Jane Roberts' book, Channeling Seth. Seth Speaks is a very difficult book to understand. And you were reading it 20 years after the fact in an environment where our society has progressed to embrace so many New Age thoughts. Modern ideologies understand that there's another side. Modern ideologies talk about physics and quantum physics and existence being pyramidal and consciousness and the physics of consciousness and the physics of being able to transform your very genes. In our modern world, we have people studying these things. And yet, you still have difficulty in 1990 understanding this book that was written in 1970. You folks over here had difficulty in, I don't know when you read it, if it was the 80s or the 90s, understanding a book that was written in the 20s, because the things they're talking about don't exist yet, or are right now on the cutting edge. And the other thing Kim said that was so worth hearing is that every time she tried to read that book, she fell asleep. You folks who read Alice Bailey, did you find you read a little and you fell asleep?
Or I would have to reread the same thing over and over.
And then you fell asleep.
Yeah, well,
Right.
Yeah, it was like,
Mhm.
how many times do I have to reread
Yeah.
this?
Well, what you didn't realize is that you were reading it in the only way that you could grasp the information. The way to read those books, those cutting-edge books that are written by, in these cases, channeled beings that really are talking about information that's 500 or 600 years out. The only way to read them is to read a paragraph and then go to sleep. And then your mind expands, absorbs, and then the next night you can read the next paragraph and it'll make sense to you. Interesting. So that's a big secret on how to read those authors. Okay? Did anybody else have the same experience with any of the Jane Roberts books?
I had a somewhat different experience. I rejected the Seth books. I found them dense, and I didn't enjoy the writing. And
Too complicated, too archaic.
it didn't grab me.
Uh-huh.
It just didn't grab me.
Okay.
And then I came across The Education of Oversoul 7.
Mm-hmm. Also a Jane Roberts book.
Genius.
Yes.
You know, and that one I just ran
Right,
through.
you-
And the whole series of them, and
Mhm.
then went back to the Seth
Yep.
works. But I still found it dense.
Yeah.
I don't remember when Florence Scovel Shinn wrote, but
She was also back there in the 20s.
yeah, it was. I didn't know if it was
Yeah.
the turn of the century or
Right.
then. And her voice, maybe it was the social construct that put me off.
Yeah. Well, a lot of the books from the early part of the 20th century, 1900 through about 1929, the language itself is archaic. And so people from our generations who are listening to those books or reading those books, we have a little trouble with the language, period. But even if you can get past, it's kind of like reading Chaucer.
Right.
It's like, I don't speak that language.
Chaucer's
It's English, but it's not my English. The thing is that even when you can get past the language barrier, you're still dealing with a knowledge barrier. One of the things that amazed me is that in the Alice Bailey material, over and over and over again throughout her books, she talked about the New World Order. Folks, we're moving into that right now. The last presidential election, former President Bush talked constantly, there will be a new world order, there will be a new world order, and it's in process. It's happening. Alice Bailey talked about that in 1922, among other things. So I don't want to belabor the point. We're getting some kind of feedback somewhere. Could we turn the sound off on that mic? Yeah, that'll fix that. Okay, thank you. That's okay. This is my point. I did research. I said, my students want to know what's on the other side. Alice Bailey channeled someone from the other side. Let's see what he had to say. Jane Roberts channeled someone from the other side. What did he say? White Eagle gave information from the other side. What did he say? Ron Posh or something. I cannot pronounce the name. It's Indian. You guys know who I'm talking about? Can you say it? Ribbon Poche. Okay. Oh, his information is phenomenal. Also channeled about our world right now, the future and enlightenment, about the other side, what's on the other side. I took a look at that. I have a little book list in the back of the booklets that were handed out to you when you came in. If you want more books, I will be glad to write them out for you. This class that you are taking tonight, tomorrow night, was researched from that material. Now, in addition to being researched, we also put the Kabbalah in there. I forgot to mention that. That's my roots in the Kabbalah came from studying for this class, to create it. Once I had the hanger to hang the class on, then my guides began channeling me the information. And they began bringing it into my life directly, so that I stumbled on it, so that I found it, so that I had to recognize it. Then I started teaching the class. And in the middle of teaching the class, they began to channel information to me that was brand new. And I said, oh, how do you like that? So this class is the result of a lot of research. It's from many, many different sources, not just one. It's the result of my own meditations and my own channeled information, both learned through direct channeling and learned through dreams. I go on to the other side in the astral state. And it's also the result of information that has been given to me through direct life experience and talking to many, many, many other teachers within the same field. So there's an enormous amount of material here. And here I'm going to try and cover what was originally a squashed 4-week course, and I'm going to try to cover it in 2 3-hour sessions. So I'm going to move fast, okay? And I will leave one part mostly out, and that's going to be the part about elementals. I used to teach that as its own class. Instead, I will refer to it, and I'll tell you your sources. But you can do your own research on that. This class, I'm going to gear more towards the human evolution. Okay? So you're with me on that. So what is my requirement, or what is my foundation? What is my right to teach this class? Because people came to me and said, would you teach it to us? Okay? And what I did is I did the best class that I possibly could, which incidentally is also constantly evolving. Because every time I teach another class in Seeing Beyond the Veil, and every time I teach another psychic development class, and every time I read another client, I get more input into this class. Interesting. And some of that will bleed into this as well. It always does. Okay, so let's get started. The first thing that we want to look at is the whole thing that got this class started. We want to know what comes next. Meaning, we want to know what happens after death. Isn't that what we want to know? When people come and get a mediumship reading, a spirit communication reading, they're often coming for that reading because they have emotional issues they want to get settled. But even after that, they're still wanting to go to that medium. Why? Because they want to be assured there is another side to this life. They want to be assured that life goes on, not just because they want to know their relatives on the other side are safe and happy, but because we want to know that we go on. Let's see a show of hands. How old were you when you lost, when it first hit home, you lost the first person or thing that really meant something important to you? Were you under 10? I was. Okay? Were you between 10 and 15? I see heads. That's very important. Those teen years are unbelievably impressionable. How many it wasn't until you were after 15 or into your early 20s? Okay, you were a little more able to deal with it at that point from an adult point of view, which usually means put it out here emotionally and don't deal with it. The thing is that didn't you, the very first time someone close to you died, and I don't care whether it was your dog, your cat, a close relative or a friend, the first time someone close to you died, your first thought was, oh my God, they're gone, I'm never going to see them again. And your second thought was, oh my God, someday I won't be here. What's over there? Where'd they go? Isn't that what goes through your head? Okay? So when you are a medium, and many of the people in this class are taking spirit communication or mediumship classes, if not with me, with someone else, if you are a medium, you are going to have people coming to you because that's what their big question is. And if you're just a plain ordinary psychic, you are still going to have people coming to you because they lost someone, saying, where'd they go? What happened? Are they happy? How do I know? When's it going to happen to me? Okay? Big question, you know. They say you're born alone unless you're a twin. And I know twins who are born alone too, so that's not necessarily always true. You're born alone. You die alone. I don't care if there's somebody sitting there holding your hand. I don't care if the priest did, last rites on you. I don't care if the whole family's gathered around having a party for you. You're still going to go across on your own. I don't care if there are people on the other side waiting to take your hand. At that moment you step through, you're going to do it on your own. Just like you got born on your own. And guess what? It's going to be just as scary to die as it was scary to get born. You made it through birth, you will make it through death. Because all death is a birth onto another plane. Have you folks given that much thought? Yes. Okay. You know, in ancient Egypt, they mourned birth and they celebrated death. And it wasn't just because they saw life as being slaves. That's just movies, folks. It's because people in ancient Egypt studied a religious and a spiritual philosophy that incorporated the unseen world. They were not as materially and physically based as we are. Okay? Because of that, they realized that this great, great, great being, which is the true you, really, really feels a little tight when it gets stuffed into this little tiny body. And that's what happens when you're born. Can you imagine when you first came into birth, your soul saying, oh my God, this feels about 18,000 sizes too small. What the heck am I going to do with this? No wonder babies sleep through the first 6 months. They spend most of their time out of body. It's a lot more comfortable. Wouldn't you if you didn't like that pair of shoes? Okay? Are you beginning to get the feel for this? So the Egyptians mourned the baby coming into life because the soul was confined, it was trapped, it was here. It wasn't out there where it could explore and grow. Not anymore. Not for 60, 70, 80, or 90 years. Or however long life was back then, the average span. Okay? The exact opposite happens when you pass. How many of you have ever had an out-of-body experience, an astral traveling experience? Okay, when you were out there, didn't you feel free? Uh-huh. In one of my classes, I believe it's Psychic Development Level 2, where we teach seeing and feeling the aura, I also teach you how to expand your aura, to let it grow beyond the body. Doesn't that feel amazing? You feel like you're not stuck and confined in this little tiny space anymore? Well, that's a tiny little bit of the feeling of how your soul feels when it allows itself to be free of the physical. So let's take a moment to look at the process of incarnation, and then you're going to understand why, when we get down here into this physically manifested world that we are all living in, we feel so confined. And why, this is an important point, on the physical plane, the power commodity is what, folks? What's the thing that gives power on the physical plane? Money. Isn't that what everybody goes after if they want to be politics or the head of the church or the more money I have, the more respect, recognition, power I have? By the way, I'm not saying anybody here is interested in that or I'm interested in that, but there's certainly a large number of people in the world, you know, that 1% who are really interested in that. Okay? My guides say, by the way, they're going to get a very big surprise, but that's okay. So here on the physical plane, the power commodity is money. What do you think the power commodity on the next plane up is?
Energy?
Energy. We'll talk about love later. Energy. The power commodity on the next plane up is energy. Now, what plane in the entire universe do you think you can find the most energy on? Here, the physical plane, right here. Okay? Folks, we're a cosmic battery. That's what we are.